Other people will join. Om Ajnanatimandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Devshatarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatyadeeshataram Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining. Thank you so much for being here tonight from all of the different places. Thank you very much for joining. So this is a 4-part series called Planting Faith, Growing Love, and this is the first session. So welcome to all of you. Thank you all so much for joining. And I have to say that it's really my honor to try to serve all of you here. And the prayer, one of the prayers I just chanted, this Om Ajnanatimandasya, the prayer says, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my teachers have opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. So I was thinking about seeds and how seeds fructify in the darkness of the earth, right? So we're all born in darkness, really, whether we're humans or animals in the wombs of our mothers. But then, yeah, seeds fructify in the darkness of the earth. But then there's this grace of light that comes to us and helps us grow. So I was so reminded of that by that prayer. So last night, maybe many of you, well, you're in different parts of the world, but last night we celebrated Nityananda Trayodasi, which is the appearance day of Lord Nityananda. And Gauravani, my son Gauravani, was sharing this beautiful song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that starts by saying, I've come to share great happy holy tidings that Lord Nityananda has opened a marketplace of the holy name, and he's selling the holy name, which is a really interesting twist, right? He's selling it. What's he selling it for? Only the price of our faith. So yeah, it's a really charming song about the marketplace of Lord Nityananda. Welcome to all of you who are joining. Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Gail. Welcome, Annie, Rukmini. And
thank you.
Katie. Welcome, Megan, Anita, yeah, Zachary. And so I want to start by asking you to unmute and just ask you in a word or two, because this is a large group, so we can't have so much yeah, so I'm going to ask you to unmute and just share. You can just shout out, what is faith to you? What is faith to you? Anyone?
Conviction.
What was that?
Conviction.
Conviction. Okay.
Foundation.
Foundation.
Fearlessness.
Beautiful.
Trust.
Trust.
Fearless.
Sorry, two came at once. Sorry?
Believe.
Believe. Beautiful. Great.
I put mental strength.
Hope. Something. I didn't hear either one of you.
Comforting.
Someone said comfort.
Comforting. Yeah.
Comforting. Beautiful. And we missed a few.
Surrendering my helplessness.
Surrender, helplessness. That's nice.
Mental strength.
Mental strength. These are all great. Thank you so much. Mental strength. Anybody else? I know we missed a couple of you said things at the same time and we missed you. Anybody else?
Fearlessness.
Fearlessness. Beautiful.
Cumulative positive experiences that lead to increased trust.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Increased trust. Okay. Anybody else? Great. Okay, thanks so much. So, yeah, these are all really interesting and varied contributions. So what I want to do is I want to unpack, first of all, my ideas for these 4 parts, these 4 classes, so you get a sense of the overview of where this journey is going to take us in the next 4 weeks. So it's a 4-part series, and I want to talk about tonight especially about the seed of faith and how it grows up into love, the seed of bhakti, how it grows into a climbing creeper that gradually grows up, and eventually, this is so charming and beautiful, that eventually just pierces through the coverings of the material universe up to the spiritual sky and just blooms with delicious and many colored fragrant fruits and flowers of tasty, sometimes the word is used, mellows or rasas. Like Gauravani and his family were just at Radhadesh mellows. So it was a beautiful kirtan festival where they're exchanging call and response kirtan. So the word mellows or rasas, exchanging love with Krishna in relationship. So how does that sound to all of you? Does that sound like a seed worth planting? Does it sound like Andrea's on board with that? Okay. Yeah, it sounds like something, if I could plant this seed with a very small endeavor, it might give me a tremendous result and benefit. Yeah. So I want to work with this metaphor of the garden of the heart in this first session. In this first session, I want to talk about seeds, the seed of bhakti, the tiny seed of spiritual faith. I want to talk about different qualities of faith. And let's talk about enriching the soil of the heart that tiny seed gets placed into, about fructifying that little tiny seed of faith and creating a good, healthy garden bed. So in Sanskrit, this foundation or this identity is called sambandha. Someone said foundation. That was really nice, about trust, about faith. So it's called sambandha, which is my identity or my foundation in this faith. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. In the second session, we'll talk about nurturing the seedlings of my faith. What complements my faith and helps it grow stronger? What does it look like to water that precious seed by hearing and chanting and bhakti practice and saintly sangha, association with saintly people, calling out to Krishna for the Krishna sun to shine down and help our little seeds sprout up. I don't know if any of you have seen the masthead of the Back to Godhead magazine, but it has a verse, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andhakar, that Krishna is like the sun and Maya is like the darkness. And when that Krishna sun will begin to shine in our hearts, then those sprouts of bhakti can start to sprout up. So then the third session, I want to talk about protecting our faith, talk about choking weeds, harmful bugs and insects, toxic insecticides, thorns on the path, the unseen shadows in the garden of the heart, and just that kind of attending to dangers on our path that may cause a crisis. Because crisis comes, whether we're looking for it or not. And on the path of bhakti, we're meant to grow and mature through crisis. So then the first two sessions are about our cultivation of the garden of the heart, cultivation of, the second and third sessions are about cultivation of the garden of our heart, growing positive, faithful feelings for Krishna. And that's called abhideya, or our actions in cultivating the garden of the heart. So in the beginning, we're trying with external actions, right? To just go within, to awaken some inklings of feeling of the first, just working with this metaphor, just working with the first buddings of love, right? To go from the external to go within, right? But it's never about trying to dazzle or impress Krishna or anyone else by the actions of service. That would completely miss the point. And sometimes we see that. Sometimes we see it even in ourselves. Oh, I'm doing this because I want to be seen doing this, but that really misses the point. It's about awakening some reciprocal love for Krishna and having Krishna take notice of us, right? But if our hearts are dead or not yet awakened, then where is the bhakti? So this is all about awakening these internal feelings, right? So then in the fourth session, it's growing faith into love, or harvesting our intentions to love. And that could be explained as kind of aiming at the goal of all of this, which is called prayojana. Prayojana is the ultimate goal of life, which would be what? To awaken some kind of a spontaneous feeling of love, at first for Krishna's service, and then later for Krishna himself. So in Sanskrit, there's a phrase from Rupa Goswami, from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he says, Anukuyena Krishna Nushilanam. This is his definition of bhakti, where he says that it's a loving feeling toward Krishna. So maybe if some of you have been reading the Krishna book or following some of our Krishna book discussions that we have on Wednesday night, Kamsa was always thinking of Krishna, but he wasn't considered to be practicing bhakti because his thinking of Krishna was not favorable. So to cultivate a loving feeling for Krishna is this kind of working definition of bhakti. And the whole process of bhakti, Srila Prabhupada says in one of his Bhagavatam purports, I was just reading this morning, that is the revival of our lost relationship with Krishna. That's the whole process of bhakti, is to revive that once sort of intrinsic relationship with Krishna. So the idea is to move from a false kind of material sense of myself as a separate person, as a separate living being, or maybe even just this body, to a sense of like a true, authentic spiritual ego, or a sense of self that, and I love this, that I am yours, Krishna, I am yours. And it's so interesting that many of the spiritual paths in this world don't really even have a concept. Some very enlightened teachers don't even have a concept that there is a spiritual self. They kind of stop at the point of nirvana, which, I would say it's kind of like going from a negative numbers of material thinking to a kind of equilibrium center point. But then there's a whole other side of spiritual activities and spiritual identity that's explained on the path of bhakti. So, talking about faith, I've been thinking that each one of us actually carries faith that we get from our culture, our family, our country, our set of values. What's good for me, what's good for my family, what's bad. It's kind of I would call it like a genetically modified faith that we get through our culture. Certain beliefs about religion or politics or the values that we usually receive from our family or culture. These are seeds pretty much of a worldly faith. And this type of faith has a Sanskrit term, if for any of you out there who like Sanskrit terms, it's called Lokika Shraddha, or yeah, I call it genetically modified seeds of faith. Modified by what? Modified by our material culture and traditions in so many ways. We're born into these traditions, and generally people just believe and accept the sort of things that come in through the culture or subliminally through their parents without thinking of it very much. Like, my parents are Christian, or my parents are Jewish or this or that, and we eat bagels, or I remember my dad used to drop us off at the Jewish religious school on Saturdays and go get the New York Times and the bagels. And that was, his kind of cultural Judaism. He was a very good person, but that was his practice and his observance in most of his life. So if this is a little sketchy or abstract, I want to give you an example. When I was a baby, my mother used to feed me Gerber's baby food, blended up meat in a jar. And by her family, by her culture, she had a certain faith that this was good and it was healthy for her baby's growth and nutrition. Because, right, her baby has to have lots of protein. Her baby has to have this blended up meat. So that's kind of what I would call a Lokika Shraddha, or a worldly faith that kind of comes from the culture subliminally from our parents, from what they kind of grew up thinking. But then the first inkling of a spiritual faith is in a different category. And it's called, in Sanskrit, it's called Shastrika Shraddha, or faith in the Holy Scriptures, or faith in the scriptures, like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or it could be other scriptures also. And then some attraction to hear from bhakti teachers. Sometimes somebody comes into a temple or hears a kirtan on the street. And I remember hearing from our friend Jaya Sita. She plays cello. Maybe some of you know her. And she's from Puerto Rico, and she played with the Puerto Rican Symphony. And so she's a professional musician. And when she first heard kirtan, it just completely threw her for a loop. Like, what? This is just completely out of my realm. This is beyond any music that I've ever heard in my life. And she was the professional musician. So that kind of attraction to, to something on the path of bhakti, right? So I would call this kind of seed, this Shastrika Shraddha, this is like a very precious heirloom seed that's treasured and handed down from generation to generation by great bhakti saints. And I don't know if you know this, but traditionally there would be seed banks in different countries. And those seed banks were very, very precious and protected. The seeds that were handed down by the grandfathers or the grandmothers would be protected in a seed bank. And sometimes during wartime, those seed banks, even today, sometimes those seed banks get bombed or targeted to create a famine or to create cultural upheaval or some kind of devastation. So how precious are these heirloom seeds, right? So what to speak of these heirloom seeds of bhakti handed down to us by bhakti saints and acharyas and great saints. And they have to be so carefully protected and in order to fructify in our hearts and nourish us. So why? If we become nourished, then we can nourish ourselves, we can nourish others, we can nourish this hungry world. I would say that it's a very hungry and thirsty world we're living in today. So here's another definition. Srila Prabhupada defines faith as, this is, I find really beautiful, an unflinching trust. Someone said trust, right? An unflinching trust in something sublime. So that's kind of an archaic word. What does sublime mean? So Webster says sublime means an elevated or lofty in thought or language, inspiring awe or veneration, supreme or outstanding, higher, noble, pure, These are the definitions of sublime, right? So yeah, unflinching trust in something sublime. This is spiritual faith. So yeah, so this word faith or shraddha comes from the Sanskrit word hrid, which means the heart. And it also means that our faith begins to begin when we start to invest our hearts. So, if it's just kind of going in one ear, out the other, and it doesn't really mean anything to me, that faith hasn't really sparked yet. But if it starts to touch the heart, that's when it really begins. And Srila Prabhupada explains that faith is awakened by the agents of the spiritual world, the agents or the emissaries of Krishna, devotees of Krishna, who Srila Prabhupada calls, this is very beautiful. I just read this in a purport the other day. Srila Prabhupada calls them messiahs. Isn't that beautiful? These messiahs, emissaries of God who come from the spiritual world. So in the same way that our eyes are able to see color, or that our ears can hear sound, it's only by faith that we can begin to perceive that spiritual world. And faith can begin to see it and feel it. And it's a supreme reality that can't be perceived by other senses. Sometimes, so often people would say to Prabhupada, can you show me God? And Prabhupada would so often respond, what you can see with your eyes, you can't even see beyond this wall. What do you think you can see? So the point is, we have to actually transform our seeing to be able to see the spiritual reality. And that transformation comes by faith. So that, perceiving the spiritual reality is the function of the soul. This is the real function of the soul, right? Some people don't believe in soul, but if you believe in soul, here's the function of the soul. So I want to ask you guys a question. Have you noticed or experienced that your faith has been enhanced by hearing from devotees who have some kind of a taste for Krishna? Have you noticed that? You can be hearing from so many people, but if you hear from someone who actually has a little taste themselves, you feel like your faith is just like the flame is getting fanned, right? So Rupa Goswami defines bhakti as this anukulyena krishnanushilanam. I said before, favorable feelings in a service relationship to Krishna. So I want to make an important point here, that bhakti is different from all the other yogas in the sense that it's not about achieving something or perfecting something. When we do yoga postures, like if you try to follow Raghunath, wow, upside down and backwards and inside out, some of these other yoga teachers who are so expert, it's about perfecting those poses and achieving like a higher yoga practice, a more evolved yoga practice. Bhakti's not about that at all. Bhakti is about receiving and then reciprocating with what we've received from Krishna and from these agents of the spiritual world that he sends down, his devotees. Here's another nice definition of bhakti that I love from Ramanujacharya. He says, your family, Shrikant, is from the Ramanuja Sampradaya, right? Is that right?
Yes, Mataji.
Yes, okay, good. So he got some good bhakti seeds, Shastrika Shraddha, from the beginning.
It's dormant.
It's dormant. Maybe you can get it, but then you can reject it. And then sometimes it comes back when you get older, right? When you decide that the material pursuits that you were following were useless, right? So anyway, here's what Ramanujacharya says. He says, bhakti is an opening of the heart, a softening of the heart. I really love this. He says, bhakti is upasana or meditation that's been saturated with priti or love. I really, really love his definition. So, because sometimes we see people practicing bhakti in a way that is actually hardening their hearts, and that's not helping them. And it's not helping anybody else. It's not helping the world, right? They're mistaking the process of bhakti for something else. And they're becoming, what is it? It could be proud. It could be, maybe they want to show something that, some kind of, they want some respect for what they're doing. But yeah, so this bhakti is about softening the heart, opening the heart. And so back to this seed metaphor, to grow up in a luxuriant way. I know my sister's a real gardener. Maybe some of you are also gardeners. Susan's my sister. She's there in the top row. Mm-hmm. So these heirloom seeds of bhakti have to be placed into soft and fertile ground. We have to turn over the soil. In other words, turn over our hearts to be able to receive them. And sometimes to fertilize soil, sometimes people will get some friendly fat earthworms and put them in the soil. Or have you ever heard of any of your friends going to Starbucks and begging for the coffee grounds? You put those in the soil, it makes the dirt really black and really rich. And then the earthworms just love just rolling around in that rich black soil. So I want to tell you an experience I had. We used to have a townhouse, and when we bought this townhouse, it was new. And there was, in front of the townhouse, there was maybe a 10-foot by 10-foot or maybe 12-foot square of dirt in front of the stairs. And I thought, I would really like to plant a tree in this square of dirt in front of our house. And so I started, it's quite funny, I started digging in the dirt, and underneath that just little layer of topsoil that the construction people put there to make it look good, they had thrown all this trash from the construction, and quite a few slabs of broken concrete were in there too. And so it was going to be completely impossible for me to plant anything in this so-called earth, which was not at all fertile, right? So yeah, so in order for the seed of bhakti to grow, it has to have this soft and fertile ground. And what makes following along in our metaphor, what makes the ground of the heart soft and fertile? Gratitude makes our heart soft. Gratitude fertilizes our heart. And then that kind of gratefulness enables the seed of bhakti to grow. And conversely, I'd say, when we expect or we think we deserve, when we're very entitled, or we want something different from what we're getting today from Krishna, that is a symptom of being ungrateful. So for the seed to grow, it needs soft and fertile soil for a grateful heart. And as we grow in bhakti, we grow in gratitude for the gifts that are all around us, and even the unseen ones that are on the way. I mean, imagine that kind of consciousness that, I would call it trust in the giver, right? Trust in the giver. That's kind of the crucial point where faith, this is like a pivotal point, I would say, where faith and gratefulness meet, right? Trust in the giver even before receiving those gifts. I don't know what's coming to me today. I was listening to one Benedictine teacher the other day, and he said, when we wake up in the morning, we should say, surprise me. I thought that was really, really interesting. So if you surprise me, will I be open to receive those surprises in the mood of gratitude and faith, So to have the courage to give thanks for the unseen gift before we unwrap it, right? Somebody gives you a birthday present, it's all in the box with ribbons and paper, and you're just thankful for the gift without even unwrapping. You don't even need to unwrap it. So another beautiful verse about this bhakti, seed of bhakti, comes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavana Jeev Guru Krishna Kripai Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. And the verse basically says that according to our karma, we living beings, Jiva souls, are just wandering and wandering throughout all the universes, up and down through the unlimited universes, up and down again and again and again. Like we may have been demigods before many times. We may have been insects or other species many, many times. So we go up and around, traveling, until what happens is at a certain point, such a traveling jiva soul becomes fortunate and receives this seed of the bhakti lata bij, which is the seed of bhakti, by the, how do we get it? From the combined mercy of Krishna and the Guru. A fortunate person can get this seed. So what do you think? What does it mean to be fortunate? Anybody want to venture something? What does it mean to be fortunate? To receive a seed like this?
I think to be open to receive.
Very nice. To be open to receive. Yeah. Anybody else? What does it mean to be fortunate? What do you think? Be open to receive. That's a beautiful answer.
The opportunity for eternal love.
Yeah. So getting that opportunity, like maybe we didn't, how could we have ever deserved such a gift? But to have somehow across my path, that opportunity came. What else? Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I was thinking that for me, it was absolutely being in the right place at the right time.
And that's a kind of a grace, right?
Very, very much.
Can I share your story? So this is Alexandra, who's just been initiated as Radha Shakti. And I have to tell shortly, just briefly tell her little story. She's a very faithful person. All her life, she's been a lover of God, but she was really searching for something deeper. And one night she lives near me in Rockville, Maryland. One night she was just trolling around on her computer looking for some spiritual knowledge. And she actually found a very bona fide guru living in South Africa. And she began to have lovely exchanges with him on the internet. And his disciples were not noticing that he was cold. And she would put in the chat, "Your guru looks like he's cold. Why don't you go get him a blanket or something?" And so this was the beginning of a very, very loving, sweet relationship. And she recently flew with her daughter to South Africa to meet him. And her daughter got to see the lions and elephants, and she got initiated, and her daughter got a special name too. So that's kind of a nice story about being fortunate, huh? Anything? Yes. Anybody else have? Nice, huh? It was really sweet. I think the other disciples were a little surprised. Who's this strange woman who's not even initiated from Rockville, Maryland? And she's saying our guru looks cold on this Zoom call? Quite funny. Anybody else have a thought about what does it mean to be fortunate or receive good fortune?
That's the word blessed.
Blessed, beautiful, to be blessed. Anything else? Okay, so yeah, what's this gift of faith or taste that, yeah, what makes you, I guess this is another question for all of you. What keeps you coming back? You know, what resonates with you? What keeps you coming back to look for Krishna, even though maybe somebody was not very nice to you at a temple, or this happened or that happened? What keeps you wanting to learn more how to love Krishna? What's your experience? Anybody want to share something? Maybe, yeah, why? Why do you keep coming back? What is it?
Well, for me, it's interesting that you said that about exchanges with people, because initially when you said it, I thought, well, for me, it's the relationships with Krishna's devotees.
Nice.
And then I thought, have I had that experience where somebody made me feel not welcome? Or sure, yeah, that's been there too, right? But the relationships are just so sweet that Yeah, it keeps me.
Nice. That's a good thing. Good to hear. Good to know. What else? Anybody else? What keeps you coming back? What is it about this bhakti thing or this Krishna thing? What is it?
Mataji, the service, the serve
To do some
others,
service.
serve Krishna.
Nice. What service do you like to do, Rukmini Priya?
I help in DD kitchen.
Nice.
Yeah, in the backup safe and the DT room.
Beautiful. Good. Anything else anybody wants to share?
For me, Mataji, it's about getting energized. Like whenever I go to the temple, I get energized and mental peace. And I feel if I stop going to the temple or not assuming the devotees, I feel I'm losing that energy. So it's like going back on a regular basis to get energized.
Oh, that's beautiful. So Shrikant has a very high-powered job that keeps him very busy and high pressure and traveling around. And so, yeah, getting energized, like plugging in your battery again to Krishna, to that Krishna connection. That's beautiful. Anything else? Anybody want to share?
Hi, Krishna. Rukmini Prabhu. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt Katie? Katie, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I have a very strong feeling that bhakti is something I've been looking for like forever. From enjoying like being raised Catholic and meditative aspects of that and other aspects. And then being like a yoga practitioner and asana teacher in the past, and just getting these tastes of kirtans, and then finally I really have a strong feeling that it's something I've just been searching and searching for, and so I feel very blessed to be in it more.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What else? Anything else? Anybody else? Alexandra put something in the chat. I mean, Radha Shakti. After meeting the deities. What does it say? After meeting the deities.
I knew my search was over.
I knew my search was over. Yeah. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada showed us the face of God, right? Quite amazing. The face of God. People
That's what I want to say. It's the sense of satisfaction and just of knowing that purpose.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Anything else? Great. Okay. Thank you so much. So I was thinking about, this idea of being kind of born in darkness. So a baby in a mother's womb, or seeds planted in the darkness of the earth. There's some anxiety, right? Some anxiety there. Is anything good going to come out of this? Or is it everything going to be all right? I mean, but then if there's some trust, or there's some faith or hope, when we plant something in the ground, or maybe if you've ever had a baby or hope for a baby, there's some hope that something good will sprout up, right? So I was thinking to, another important metaphor here is the idea of a newborn baby. So faith and a new baby. What can a new baby really do? Can a new baby, after being born, can it really do anything except be held by the mother in trust? The baby can kind of just be smilingly sitting on the mother's lap. Hopefully the mother is loving, and the baby can just feel like, I just have such a loving foundation of trust. So seeds also, when they're being held in Mother Earth, and then we have faith and trust and hope that some good new life is going to sprout up and grow. But then what happens when that baby starts to grow up to become a toddler, right? With her own will, and every stage of growth, new changes, new challenges, and sometimes anxieties, right? But Krishna assures us in Bhagavad Gita not to fear, right? because those anxieties come up every day in every moment of growth. So you know, like when we grow from a baby into a toddler, that baby is, you know, as Srila Prabhupada would say, that baby body is gone, right? And the new challenges of being a toddler or being a young teenager or being a young adult. A friend was texting me this morning. She's so worried about her daughter because, you know, some guy has been kind of, you know, coming on to her daughter in inappropriate ways. So in each stage of growth, it's like the previous body dies and we get this new body with new challenges and new anxieties. But Krishna tells us, do not fear. You know, we came through, you know, the word anxiety actually comes from the Greek about going through a narrow passage, like a narrow place, which is like something we come through in our birth. We're born in a situation of anxiety. And don't we also leave this world in a situation of anxiety, right? At our moment of death. So by receiving this fortunate blessing of the path of bhakti, we're meant to try to understand in this life how to, okay, I may have anxiety, but I don't have to go to the place of fear. I can hold the anxiety and recognize it as anxiety, but trust in Krishna and not go to the place of fear, which is so destructive, right? So see it as an observer. Like Bhagavad Gita teaches us to be an observer, not to get sort of sucked into the ups and the downs and all the craziness that can happen in life. So to recognize that anxiety as anxiety, but not descend to that place of fear, right? He says to take shelter of him and surrender to him. Sometimes the word surrender has a difficult connotation for us. You know, we think of wartime. All right, come out with your hands up, you know, wave the white flag. And it means like a total failure. Surrender. It's almost like it's in our subconscious that surrender is almost like a failure. But it's, if we think of it more as taking shelter of Krishna, I think it has a more positive connotation for us, and we can receive it a little bit better in our hearts. Yeah. So yeah, just recognize that uncertainty, that in each new stage of our growth, we can take shelter of Krishna and ask him to guide us and show us our next little baby steps as we begin to grow this creeper of bhakti of bhakti love in our hearts, right? And another interesting thing about seeds, think about this. Did you ever think about how every seed has to destroy its shell or its container? Like in order to fructify and sprout, it has to destroy that external covering that was holding it in order to experience that new growth, that unprecedented, unseen growth. So I want to share a story with you. I don't know if some of you may have heard this before, but this is a story about the redwood trees in California. So the forest rangers in California, in the redwood forest, they were noticing that they were taking such great care of the redwood forest that no new baby redwood trees were starting to grow up at all. And they started to research to try to figure out why this was happening, because they were doing their best. You know, sometimes the Christians use this word stewardship, that we should be stewards of the earth. But it has, to me, it has almost like a pompous kind of a connotation that we are going to be stewards of the earth. But to be cared for by the earth, to be cared for by the gifts of God, and not to think that we're the big controllers of the earth. So these forest rangers were stewarding the forest, and they were preventing forest fires, but they didn't realize, so that when they began to study this, they began to realize that that the redwood seeds are so hard that they require the heat, the intensity of the heat of a forest fire to crack them open. And then what happens when there's a forest fire is the forest fire will create a bed of ash in the forest. And those cracked open seeds of the redwood trees can kind of nestle into that ash and begin to just start the process of fructification. And then what happens next is that because some of the trees have been burnt in the forest, just this, I mean, talk about grace and talk about how could anyone not see that there's a supreme order or supreme divine being, in charge here. So there just the right amount of light comes into the forest, so that those little fructifying seeds can just start to blossom and grow and become little seedlings of redwoods. And another interesting thing about redwoods is that thinking about the interconnectivity of all living beings. When a new baby redwood, the seedling sprouts out of the seed, right? It immediately winds itself around the roots of the redwood tree that's right next to it. Did you ever know that before? It's amazing. It's so amazing. So what does that mean? It means that every single tree in the redwood forest is connected to every other tree in the forest, either directly or indirectly. So that's kind of a metaphor for life in this world, isn't it? That we are all interdependent. We're all dependent on God, and we're all interdependently connected to every other living being, either directly or indirectly, even imperceptibly, right? So, yeah, that's a great lesson from the redwoods. So then I was thinking that our hearts are actually like those redwood seeds, that they need to crack open. And just like those forest rangers, somebody put up a picture of Tulsi. That's beautiful. Yeah, so just like those forest rangers, we're trying to prevent any kind of heat or intense pain in our lives. We're trying to make everything as peaceful as possible, which is a good intention, right? Thank you for that picture of Tulsi. That was beautiful. But we're trying to prevent that kind of pain and suffering and intense heat in our lives. And so it's very, very hard for our hearts to crack open, but they do crack open because that kind of intensity of anxiety in this world is unavoidable. And what happens is when we can go through anxiety, when those anxieties can crack open our hearts, and when we can take the proactive step of taking shelter of Krishna in those moments, then what happens is that little bhakti creeper can begin to sprout and can begin to grow up and start to wind its way up gradually, ultimately to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So maybe think of pain or suffering or grief in a different way. I was just on the phone with my sister Susan before this call, and I was telling her something that I'd read, because my friend Giri and I, Giri Govardhan, are doing a grief support group. We've done 2 12-session grief support groups. Something I read said that grief and gratitude are kindred souls. So something about suffering, or when we have grief in our lives, something about it, it could be anything. It could maybe your favorite pet passed away, or maybe a very dear relative or partner passed away, or maybe sometimes someone loses a limb or loses the ability to speak or to hear. But what happens is when we experience this kind of grief, it's another time that our heart begins to crack open, and we begin to experience. It's amazingly, it's sort of counterintuitive, wouldn't you think? It's counterintuitive that when I have some loss, I begin to appreciate what I haven't lost. Or, sometimes you hear stories and you read these in the media often, that someone gets cancer and they say, oh, that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me because I was able to turn my life around, and appreciate what was so important that I wasn't noticing in my life. So, just as the topic what I'm thinking about is just cracking our hearts open, in whatever way we can. Sometimes it comes through suffering. Sometimes it comes from intense longing. Sometimes someone is very ardently longing for Krishna, maybe something from a previous life. But when we can long for Krishna like that, that also cracks our hearts open. So, so we grow through these challenges in the different stages of growth on the path of bhakti, just like a child grows through the different stages of life. And just like it's so healthy for a child to be held in the lap of the mother when it's a baby. So then to begin to interact with other children when they get a little bit older. So we're going to talk about those kinds of interactions in our next sessions. But let me just review what we've gone over here, and then I want to ask for your thoughts and reflections and see what questions you might have also. So just to recap, we talked about the difference between a worldly faith and spiritual faith. That how do we get a spiritual faith? It comes by the combined grace of Krishna and spiritual teachers on the path. And we talked about how faith begins when we can invest our hearts, right? Like I may be going to the temple for 20, 30 years, but maybe I never really invested my heart, right? But it begins when we invest our hearts. We talked about how faith is a trust in something sublime, something higher, noble, supreme. We talked about how bhakti is about reviving our lost relationship with Krishna, and about moving from a false separatist kind of sense of self to a spiritual kind of ego sense of self as belonging to Krishna, that I am yours, which is so beautiful, this idea of Krishna, I am yours. And then when people get really, really advanced, like the gopis of Vrindavan, they think he's mine, not I'm yours, he's mine. So that's another stage of bhakti. We talked about enriching the soil of the heart with gratefulness, to make it fertile for that seed of bhakti to fructify and grow. And we talked about how bhakti is a softening of the heart, a cracking open of the heart to love. And we talked about how it's not about achieving, but about receiving Krishna's gifts. So yeah, this is a little bit of a recap of the topics. So I want to hear from all of you now. What was important for you here? What were your takeaways, or what are your questions? Maybe you have thoughts or questions or reflections. Love to hear from you.
Hare Krishna, Rukmini.
Hare Krishna.
So nice to get you like almost one-on-one.
Who is that? Who is that?
This is Anna Rita. Hare Krishna. Sorry I don't have my video up.
Yeah, well, we're looking at your name, but our names are different from ourselves, but we know Krishna's name is not different from himself. So it's good to see your name.
Haribol, thank you. So for me, something that I'm gonna walk away with and reminisce over and think over while I sleep tonight will be when you said the seed having the shell, it must crack open that outer shell in order to fructify. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now. So thank you so much for that perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes we just feel like, am I going nuts? Am I cracked? Am I just cracked? Am I nuts? And sometimes, sometimes it could even be the best thing that ever happened to me. Maybe it's a total shift in my values. Like I was going along in a certain way and something happened and I'm thinking in a different way now. I'm cracked open. Yeah, what else?
Mataji, what's inspiring to hear is not getting sucked in the ups and downs, and and just don't descend into fear.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. Don't descend into fear. Be an observer, right? Be an observer and recognize that this is anxiety and see it for what it is. And remember that we were born into this world in a state of anxiety, right? We're crying, we get a little slap on the bottom, and that we'll leave this world in a state of anxiety as well. But if in that anxiety we can take shelter of Krishna, that anxiety becomes the greatest blessing, right? Because it's like a little slap. Wait, wake up, you're missing your life. Wake up, you're missing your life, right? So yeah, thank you, Rukmini Priya. What else was important here?
Very well, Mataji. For me, it's for the bhakti seed to grow. I liked what you said about enriching the soil of the heart by being grateful and using bhakti as a way to soften your heart, to not get puffed up. So that's something to reminisce and work on.
Yeah, because as soon as we think I've got it down here, I know everything, I'm on top of the world, then we lost the plot. We lost the plot, you know. So yeah, that gratitude is you know, it's so important. And if we can keep a simple heart and a simple and grateful heart, then it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And sometimes it's not easy because, you know, we get so tricked. Like, I like the metaphor of a fountain, right? The metaphor of a fountain is that the fountain has a bowl, right? The fountain is gurgling up, gurgle, gurgle, and it's got transparent water. Water is all, transparency is also a metaphor for the mode of goodness, to be transparent to the will of God. So this fountain is gurgling and bubbling up, and the bowl of the fountain is about so big. And then if the water can overflow outside of that bowl of the fountain, then it's so beautiful. And you see so many like rainbows in the fountain. You hear this beautiful gurgling sound. But if we make that bowl of the fountain of our hearts bigger and bigger and bigger, then the fountain will never overflow. Because sometimes we might feel grateful. Like sometimes we start feeling grateful, but then we think, well, wait a minute. My neighbor has a bigger one or a better one or a newer model. You know, like we might get a new car and we might feel really happy and grateful that I got this new car. But then I just look in the neighbor's driveway and I see that, oh gosh, this guy's driving a Tesla and a really expensive one. And, you know, so what happens is when we get kind of hoodwinked or bamboozled by this sense of entitlement or that lack of gratitude, then we lose the plot. And our fountain, the bowl of our fountain is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it doesn't overflow. Have you guys ever heard of the insidious disease? We're all worried about COVID and influenza, right? But there's a disease called affluenza. Have you heard of that one? It's a really, really insidious disease that, you know, more and more and more and more. I got to have more and more and more. I saw this really interesting film. I have to share this with you. I saw this film. You know how sometimes in America we see these big kind of almost like a dumpster, but it's like a big bin. You can put your clothes in there and they're going to send the clothes to people who need them. Well, usually what happens is they send the clothes to other countries and you know, sell them or whatever. But anyway, so I saw this film. It was these young girls in Bangladesh, and they were in one of these receiving situations. They were receiving all of these clothes, rejected clothes that had come over from America. And the film was being translated. Where is Poppy? Yeah, Poppy, you're from Bangladesh. You might have seen this before. So they're receiving these clothes that have come over from America. And in the translation, the girls are laughing and they're saying, yeah, this one girl says, yeah, you know, in America, water is really, really expensive. And so Americans, they don't wash their clothes. They just throw them away. So this culture of this affluenza, this throwaway culture, And then it becomes more and more sad, because then it becomes almost like throwaway people. People feel unwanted and unneeded, like the clothes. You know, I can just toss out the clothes. And I sometimes I feel tossed out as well. So yeah. What else was valuable to you here? Or were there questions that you had, or points that you'd like to bring up?
Krishna Mataji, I want your tips that about the faith. Like, if the one person has a lot of faith in the Lord, and how can they can motivate the other family members to have faith towards the Lord Krishna?
Thank you. That's an important question that comes up a lot for us all, right? You know, because if we're tasting some sweetness of bhakti, we naturally want to share it, especially if we're a mom or, you know, other people in our life that we love. We want to share that, and we want to see them also taste that sweet taste. But have you ever heard the saying that example is better than precept? Like, you know, I may be on my child's back to practice piano, practice violin, practice, do your math homework, whatever. But if I love piano, or I love violin, or if I love to chant, then naturally that love will be imbibed, or it will be contagious to my other family members. They will also catch that sweetness if it's something I love. But I can hammer on them, till all night and day, and they won't necessarily get it. But we can try to show that love ourselves and pray to Krishna for them. Pray to Krishna for everyone. Prayers are very powerful and very effective.
And feed them a lot of Krishna prasad.
Yes, that's the main thing. That was Prabhupada's secret weapon, right? Prabhupada called gulab jamans ISKCON bullets, right? And all those really quite ignorant hippies who were coming around in New York at 26 2nd Avenue. I see some New Yorkers here. They knew that they could come up to Prabhupada's desk at any time and just take one of those ISKCON bullets, gulab jamans, out of the jar, and feeding their body and feeding their spirit, right? So Krishna Prasad is so important for opening the heart, for cracking open the heart. And sometimes people have difficulties at work. I know, I often hear this question that people, there's some one-upsmanship or some backbiting or gossip in the office. The very best thing you can do if you're in a situation like that is have a big jar of prasadam cookies on your desk. I wouldn't suggest gulab jamans because they're too gooey and people can't relate to them so much.
Yeah.
But if you have a jar of prasadam cookies on your desk, then that's going to really change the whole atmosphere in the office, and you'll be the most beloved, popular person in the whole office.
Thank you.
And it works on your own kids too, So, yeah. What else? What was important, or do you have any questions about this journey of faith? Anything else that was coming up for you?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My takeaway is faith begins when you invest our heart. The reason for that, because it just brought back something for me that I had experienced. My brother, he in 2010 he had gotten arrested for a murder charge, which he wasn't involved in. And at that point in time, I was helpless because he's my only brother. And with that experience and going through the process was very, very difficult of having to go to court, just seeing him being arrested. He was in prison. And invest our heart is that the only person that I could have fall to the lotus feet of was Krishna. So at that point in time, I gave him my faith. It helped me to become humble. It helped me to become patient. It taught me, because he was in prison for 18 months. And he was freed afterwards because there was nothing against him. And there was no one around me here that had that faith that he was going to actually come out, because everybody around me was so worried and thinking that this matter would prolong. And I was the only one that had so much faith and conviction in the lotus feet of the Lord that just by you just saying that here today, faith begins when we invest our heart. I could not have invested anything. You could have had money. It could not have taken him out of there at that point in time because it's a process. So, yeah, faith begins when we invest our heart. And I've invested my entire heart, and I have seen what the mercy of the Lord can do for us.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Did your
you.
brother, I'm wondering, did your brother also have an opening of faith through that experience?
Yes, while in prison, he actually stopped eating meat and he began chanting and he read the Bhagavad Gita, and he's still not a perfect devotee, but he's a
Neither am
believer.
I.
And
Neither am I.
yeah.
Mhm.
So yes, he is where I want him to be in terms that he's home and he does believe in Krishna, and anything that I, encourage him or tell him about, Krishna, he's there.
That's
He's
amazing.
there.
That's
It
an
is amazing.
story. It's an amazing story. Sometimes the worst thing we can ever imagine becomes the path to, open.
Yes, definitely. So, and you had mentioned, and even in our suffering, that we can, you know, be able, that bhakti can open up in our lives. And I think bhakti has even opened up more at that point in time. That I had, that made me believe in Krishna and nothing else.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I often think that worry is the same mental process, right, as prayer. Like one just pulls us down and one just pulls us up. So with the same mind, I can be worrying, and wringing my hands and crying even, or I can be crying for Krishna in prayer. So it's like leaning into the shadow. We'll talk more about shadow work in our third session, but leaning into the shadow of worry or leaning into the light of the Krishna sun. Thank you so much for that powerful story. What else? Who else would like to share something?
Mataji, real quick, I just want to know from your perspective, would you, the same way you just defined that worrying, would you also say that that's how you define anxiety? Like, is it one and the same, or anxiety and worry two like different things?
Who is
I'm
this?
trying to diagnose myself. Sorry.
I'm trying to see who's speaking. Who is that?
Oh, Hare Krishna, it's Anna Rita again.
Anna Rita. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I would say they're, kind of in the same department, like, yeah, I would say they're in the same department. Our anxieties make us worry. Well, how does Prabhupada define it? He says, lamenting about the past, something that can't be changed, or fear for the future, So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a beautiful poem. Let's see, how does it say? How does it start? Act in times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. Something about, the past. Forget the past. That's what it is. Forget the past that sleeps, and ne'er the future dream at all, but act in times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. So we can really, if you think about it, the past is no longer real. The future is a dream. The only thing that really is real is this moment right now. And I can offer this moment in service to Krishna. And it can be a very conscious thing. Like if I'm about to get in the shower, I can say, I am going to take a shower right now for the pleasure of you, Krishna. Right now, I'm putting on my shoes to go to work for the pleasure of Krishna. It can be very conscious. I'm washing this dish. I'm washing my hands for the glory of God, for the pleasure of you, Krishna. It can be very conscious and intentional, even if it's really, really tiny little things. And then that creates a moment of holy sacrament, really, in connection with Krishna in the moment, even in tiny, tiny ways. And this is Krishna consciousness, not to lament over the past or fear over the future. Because what can we really do? Krishna is the supreme controller anyway, right? If I'm worried about my kids, are they going to make anything of themselves? Is my boss going to fire me tomorrow? Is Putin going to drop an atomic bomb on the US and Canada? We can fear, but we just have to put those fears at the lotus feet of Krishna, because we're tiny. He is the big fire. We're just little tiny sparks. And when we isolate, just like a spark, when it flies away from the fire, it goes dark. Or in the Bible, it says, the soul that sinneth dieth. It's not that the soul really ever dies, but when we isolate ourselves, we become cold and dark. So what else?
Haribol Mataji, I like what you said about doing things for the pleasure of Krishna. But my question is, I feel a sense of hypocrisy, or maybe just saying it for the sake of saying it. I don't realize it, meaning I don't have that appreciation and honest in making that statement. So how do we make that transition, it going from a mere statement to actually feeling it?
That's something we're going to be talking about in this process of developing this bhakti path, because in the beginning it really is just saying it, or just lip service or mechanical, but gradually it becomes spontaneous, and that's the process of growing faith. So what we do is we tell Krishna, Krishna, I don't really know what it means to offer something to you in love. I don't really know what love means at all, but I'm trying my best to offer this to you in love. Prabhupada was once saying that, he was giving an example of how to offer something to Krishna. He said, what is my value? What is the value of my things? It is nothing. He said, I'm rotten, I'm fallen, but Krishna, I've brought this thing for you. And he started to cry. It was amazing. His voice started to break. So, and then another nice prayer is, my dear Lord Krishna, I am just a hypocrite. I'm trying to love you, but I don't know how to love you. But whatever attachment I have for the things I do love, please let me put that attachment at loving you, more than I love my car, more than I love my house, more than I love my anything. Let me love you the most.
Very well. Thank you.
Yeah. What else? We have a little bit more time. Anybody else want to? Any question or any? Yes.
Sure. I really enjoyed how you were saying, like, trust in the giver is sort of where faith and gratefulness meet.
Yes.
And another thing, like a pair of words that jumped out, was bhakti is about receiving and reciprocating. And it was just making me think about how we were talking the other night about Ram and being in a really service mood, and it is a good feeling, and and then a bit more towards the beginning, how it's a reviving a loving relationship with Krishna that, like, maybe we didn't understand was there, or had like an inkling, but wanted to really explore it.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so interesting that bhakti is not an achieving path, that it's a receiving path. I always think of the line from Shakespeare, the quote where he says, this is from Merchant of Venice, he says, the quality of mercy is not strained, it falleth as the gentle rain from heaven. So yeah, it's just descending down, mercy of bhakti.
And I love how you can kind of jump on the path immediately, you know, by starting the practices. And I feel like not like a searching for faith and it's going to take all this time and all these steps. Like you can start to be in relationship or remember relationship with Krishna as right away. Like,
in a very simple way. Yeah. Once Prabhupada said something really funny. He said, you can touch your nose like this, or you can touch your nose like that. So it's a very simple process. Just offer your love, you know, in a very simple way. Offer a flower. You know, even, you know, sometimes he says even a child can do it, right? So, but we make it so overcomplicated when we try to overthink it, right? Sometimes Prabhupada would use the word over-intelligent. This person is over-intelligent, you know. So better to be simple. And I have a phrase, the satisfaction of simple smallness, sacred smallness, the satisfaction of sacred smallness. Yeah. Because I think that's about material growth. Like, you know, like a little child is growing. She's a baby and she's being held by her mother. He's being held by his mother. And then they get to be 2 and it's like, no, I can do it myself. Don't help me. I'm going to do it myself. So I think in the material realm, our growth is about control and about ego. Whereas in bhakti, it's very different. Our growth is about humility and gratitude. It's very opposite. I was remembering, you know, when my mother was near her death, she fell and she broke her hip, and she was in the hospital, and I was there with her, and she was not a very spiritual person, and she was a little bit you know, losing her mental capacity also. But it was so frustrating for her. And she was going into surgery and she said, I just feel like I have no control. And this very wise Latina doctor, who looked to me like she was about 17, she was probably at least 25 or 26. Anyway, this brilliant young woman, she just looked at my mother and she said, no one does. My mother said, I feel like I have no control. And this brilliant young woman says, no one does. So, you know, on this path of gaining faith, getting faith in Krishna, we can take it one step further and say, I take shelter of your control, Krishna. You, actually, my son Gauravani has been telling me, just pray to Krishna to take complete charge of your life. And then you'll see the serendipity start to happen. So I've been praying to Krishna, please take complete charge of my life. And then magic starts to happen. Because when we think, you know, like Draupadi, right? She's looking at her 5 husbands. Who has 5 husbands? She's looking at the seniors in the assembly. And they were all useless. No one was helping her. And she's trying herself to protect herself. But she had no control, right? So when we follow Draupadi, reach up to Krishna, hey Govinda, that's when the magic starts to happen. That's when Krishna starts supplying unlimited sari, right? Or Shrikant, you wouldn't wear unlimited sari, but you could have an unlimited dhoti. What else? We have a few more minutes if anybody else has anything to share or any questions or any complaints or disagreements or
if you'd allow me, Mataji, a question. You spoke about a shell opening up sort of from the heart, the seed of bhakti grows, but also there is also fear of weeds starts also growing.
That's what we're going to talk about in the 3rd session.
Okay.
We're going to come to that in the 3rd session because that's all about shadow work. And it's about what does this, okay, we're looking at this Tulsi plant. Can you all see that Tulsi plant on, her name is Chitra Devi. She put up a picture of a Tulsi plant. If you know what a Tulsi plant looks like, then if a weed's growing in there with the Tulsi plant, you can pull out the weeds. But if you don't know what a Tulsi plant looks like, you might pull out the Tulsi plant thinking it's a weed. We had this experience in one of our temples in Germany once. They were doing Tulsi puja to they thought it was a Tulsi, but it was actually a basil plant. And somebody came from some other temple that, hey, you guys, you're you're circumambulating a basil plant, which is close. It's a cousin, but the thing is, when we're, it can be very deceptive, and that's the way this world is. That's the deception. And when we're covered with pride, these are also weeds. Pride. We'll get into that, but pride, entitlement, lack of gratitude. Then we think, oh, I'm practicing bhakti. Everyone look at me. I remember, this is a funny story. When I was a new devotee, I was initiated in Montreal, Canada, and there was this one French Canadian young man at the time. He later became a sannyasi, but he would say we would go on Harinam Sankirtan on the street, and he would say to people on the street in Montreal, this is so funny. He would say in his French accent, this is my imitation. He would say, "Perhaps you have been to our temple and you have seen me jump." Like, this is the reason to go to the temple, to see you jump? Excuse me? But that's not what it's about. You're missing the plot here. So yeah, so weeds, being able to, it takes humility. It takes gratitude to recognize what is the actual plant, the actual bhakti creeper. So that takes, it takes knowledge and devotion, humility and gratitude. Yeah. What else? Anybody else have anything that they'd like to share? Megan's smiling and shaking her head. Anything you'd like to
Hare
share?
Krishna, Rukmini Prabhu.
Why are you smiling?
I just wanted to quickly
Andrea.
share, if it's
Yeah.
okay. You know how Krishna kind of coordinates sometimes for you to have classes in one day that kind of combine to be like one class. So this morning in Srimad Bhagavatam class, somebody was asking for advice of like how to deal with like anger, and that they're seeing that they're getting better at dealing with anger the more that they grow their bhakti. And we had another devotee kind of give the advice that if you count your blessing, the anger dissipates, because he said anger really comes from you wanting something that you either can't have or aren't having or whatever. So if you start counting your blessings, the anger dissipates. And then in your class, you all of a sudden you just throw this great thing of trust in the giver. Faith and gratefulness come together. And that's that whole idea of counting your blessings again. And it reminds me of something you've said before, which is that gratitude makes space for Krishna's grace, right? So like if we're grateful, if we're counting our blessings, then there's no space for the anger. There's no space for all these other, I guess, weeds and things that we're going to be talking about later. So it's just, I always find it very interesting when kind of Krishna puts those bookends of classes. Like I started the day with that, and then he's finishing the day with it. So I'm like, okay, Krishna, I get it. You want me to pay attention to that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, because there's no room in the same heart to have gratitude and alienation. We can't be angry and be grateful at the same time. Now, someone might say, well, there's such a thing as righteous anger, right? Dr. Martin Luther King talked about righteous anger. But I would say that before we deploy in ourselves righteous anger, we should be very, very careful. I mean, Prabhupada also talked about the whole Bhagavad Gita was spoken to convince Arjuna to become angry and fight. Hanuman used anger against Ravana to burn down the whole city. Nobody asked him to burn down the whole city of Lanka, but he did. He used his anger. But for us, I would say we should be very, very careful, because it can be very deceptive. I'm using my anger for Krishna. Just like using anything else, just like a knife, right? You can use it to heal, to cut out a cancer. You can use it if you're trained, or you can use it to kill someone. Or money, money can be a very, very powerful force for serving Krishna, or it can be someone's destruction. So any kind of opulence, you could say, beauty, wealth, strength. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Hare Krishna, Gail.
Yeah, two things. One is a question, but I wanted to start by a comment, which, when you were saying that bhakti is about receiving, I was kind of feeling like that tells just like half the story. Because I feel like, it's more like about reciprocity, because it's a loving relationship is never one-sided, So
Yeah, that's
I
nice.
feel,
It starts by
yeah,
receiving, but then we go further.
yeah,
Yeah. Nice.
yeah. So we kind of always want to reciprocate with Krishna for everything that he is doing for us, So yes, like you said, it starts with receiving, but then we also want to reciprocate with what we're receiving.
That's a
So
natural symptom of love, yeah? To want to
yeah,
reciprocate. Beautiful.
yeah, love is reciprocity, it's
Nice.
reciprocity. My question though is this thing that keeps coming up, because I didn't really fully get it, when we were saying that. I can't even repeat it properly. That's how much I didn't get it. About when faith and something meets in the trust of the giver, something like that. How does that go? Can you just like repeat that?
Yeah, Andrea, you had it a second ago. Was it gratitude and what
So
was it?
it's trust in the giver, and that's where faith and gratefulness meet.
Trust in the giver is where faith
and gratefulness meet.
Because it's talking about being grateful for something that is still unseen. In other words, I can be grateful for the things I have, but can I be grateful for something that hasn't even appeared on my plate yet or in my life yet? Like that idea of this Benedictine monk saying that we should begin our day by saying, surprise me. That's, so being grateful for the unseen gifts that may come like angels into my life, right?
Oh, so when we say faith, where faith and gratitude meet, that gratitude is for something yet unseen.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
So some givers with faith.
Or like, like think of it, somebody gives you a birthday present and it has a box with a wrapping paper.
Yeah.
And you're anxious to see what's inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just what I wanted? Or is it maybe something I don't really want at all? But to be just as grateful without even opening the box, without even caring what's inside, just to be grateful.
Yeah, knowing the intention of the giver.
Yeah, that's trusting Krishna, right?
Yeah.
So but it gets really hard when it's something that we don't really want in our life, like the loss of a beloved family member or pet or a limb or a disease that we didn't want or a situation we didn't want. And that's when it becomes really raw. And that's when the seed of the heart really cracks open. But those are the
actually, when I'm sorry, let me see. When Dear Devi Dasi was talking about her brother, I was like, boy, how do you have faith in that gift wrap box? It's like I don't know how you kept your faith there, dear, in such a, especially since your brother was in there for 18 months, you begin to wonder, isn't it? Where is the mercy in this situation? And so I'm actually just wondering how she kept her faith, how you kept your faith nourished during that ordeal.
Let me just say something that somebody might be thinking, can we be grateful for everything? No, we can't necessarily be grateful for everything, but we can be grateful in everything. In everything, not necessarily for everything. Can we be grateful for war? Can we be grateful for murder? Can we be grateful if our dear brother is in prison for 18 months? No, but we can be situated in gratitude while I take shelter of Krishna in that situation. You want to share? We have, I'm mindful of the time. We have 1 minute. Dira, would you like to say something from your realization from that situation?
She asked the question how I was able to, keep that faith in the situation. I felt as though if I didn't have anybody else except Krishna, more so I leaned to Lord Nishingadev. He he made me fearless. He made me understand that this is a process. This was supposed to happen. It brought a light to me in all different perspective. And with that faith, that firm faith, even though it was a horrible situation, um, it worked out well. And meaning to say, after the fact, after everything, when you're in it, as you say, you have to be grateful. When you're in a situation, we would not be grateful for everything at that moment. But afterwards, I felt as though if I were to be placed in that position again, I will do it all over the same way again.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the association of very pure-hearted devotees that we get on the path of bhakti, with such beautiful realizations. How to be grateful, not necessarily for everything, but in everything. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dira. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your beautiful contributions, your beautiful hearts. Thank you for trying to crack open the seed of the heart on the path of bhakti and make that soil very fertile and soft, and putting those nice fat juicy earthworms in the soil of your heart so that they can turn over the soil and make it soft and fertile. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week we're going to talk a little bit more about the practices of bhakti, the hearing and the chanting, and how do we water that seed of bhakti and make it grow. So thank you all so much for being here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. Thank you so
Hare
much,
Bol.
Rukmini Prabhu. Hare Bol.
Thank you for today.
Thank you.